Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is topic 8, the lesson about drones. There are two things that you're learning about in this topic. One of those is robots and the other is drones. This is a short lesson. Let me show you the environment you'll be working from this week. This is Blackboard, of course. You have the quiz and the issue analysis at the top. All the robot material is in that folder right there, and the drone material is in here. You're obviously in here because you're watching the movie. Let me give you a little bit of information about what you're about to experience, what you're about to read and see. The material that I'm going to present to you is from a number of different places. Some of it comes from some material I got from Mark Champa. Some of it comes from my own research, and then some of it also comes from an interview that I did, or actually a visit I got from a drone pilot who's a former friend of mine, and I'm going to show you what some of the stuff that he showed us. He came and spoke to a CIS 205 class for me about 2 years ago. And so that's what you're going to be hearing about. If you wanted to read about this, you could read about it from issue 16 in the textbook. You do not have to read issue 16 in the textbook. Let me say that again. You do not have to read issue 16. If you want to, you can. In that particular issue, what they're addressing is whether the public would have a stake or have an interest in how drones are used. And I don't use that issue anymore because to me the question is obvious. Yes, of course they do. You know, if somebody's going to be flying something over your house relatively low, yeah, you have a stake in that. Or if you're flying on an airplane and people are going to be flying little drones all around the airport, you know, where you're going to be landing and taking off from, yes, you have a stake in that. So that's a really hard one to say, no, you don't have a stake in that. Of course you do. So we don't use that one as a debate topic anymore. I don't. But what there is some stuff in there that is relevant to a couple of other topics, like the robots. And drones are not robots, and you'll see that. We'll talk about that in just a second. Drones are not robots, but they eventually could be if you incorporate enough artificial intelligence in these things, which we've learned about in back in like topic 4. If you put enough AI into a drone, it may become autonomous, and at that point be like a self-driving car, be a self-driving drone, self-driving aerial vehicle, in which case at that point it's a robot. So they're on their way there, and so it has some impact on this whole issue with robots. Also, it has an issue with when we talk about cyber war, because one of the ways in which we can surveil enemies, one of the ways that we can attack enemies is through drones, very, very much so. The amount of human pilots that are needed has decreased because we're now able to use drones to do so much of that surveillance, and even some of the dropping of weapons. And so they have an effect on a number of different topics. There are 3 topics that I can think of that we do debate, and so that's why I provide you with this information. So you don't have to read issue 16 in the textbook unless you want to. If you do, I would read the yes side. I wouldn't even waste time on the no side. The no side is really an audit from basically for Border Patrol, and it's really kind of a strange document to include in that debate. But if you want to read issue 16, go ahead. The intro and the yes side are okay. The no side, I think, is not that great. Okay, so you're not going to see questions about drones on the quiz. So this quiz right up here, that has nothing to do with drones. But as you do the issue analysis, about a third of the issue analysis has to do with drones. And so the fact that you're watching this and you're digesting this information, that's really good. So you'll be well prepared to take on that third of the issue analysis, based on this stuff you're about to hear. As you look in this folder, you'll see that there are a number of documents. There is a presentation from Brian Cherry. That's my friend that is the drone pilot and also a jet pilot. So when he came and spoke to us, that was the presentation that he gave. He let me have the PDF of the presentation. There are a couple of different articles about drones and how those have been used in various different military applications, and I got some information about both of those from Dr. Kai Meggers, if you know him at all, from the management and marketing departments. Really great guy. He's a visiting professor with us, and he's a lieutenant colonel about to promote to colonel in the German army. He goes back. He's in the reserves over there, and he's a friend of mine, and we try to hang out and and visit every so often. And so he'd just come back from one of his summers, and we were talking about the exercises that he had basically been working with his military unit over in the summer in Germany, and the amount of drone. He's with an infantry unit, which means he's like one of the guys on the ground with a rifle, and he's at the battalion level. At the point you're a lieutenant colonel and a colonel, you're working with larger units at that point. You're an 05, 06, and so he was talking about the amount of damage they were sustaining from, and they were basically fighting Russians. It was wargaming at one of the places that they have over there, and the amount of damage that the drones were just inflicting on the troops his troops was devastating. And it'd be the same if the American troops were fighting them, and the amount of damage that American drones can inflict on our foes as well. It's just it's very much part of the battlefield now. And so that's what you're seeing in those documents right there. My notes are right there. They're not so important on this one. The PowerPoint, if you want those, I would recommend that one quite a bit. From the PowerPoint, you can get links out to several different websites. And so let's get to it. So let me jump on over to the PowerPoint, and I'll show you this information about drones. Okay, so let's define what a drone is. A drone is basically, it's an unmanned aerial vehicle. It's something that flies that doesn't have people in it. That's what a drone is. And the another name for also known as, that's what, of course, what AKA is. They're also known as unmanned aerial vehicles. I have a picture of a drone bee. A drone bee is a male bee, and the name drone that we have for these types of vehicles kind of harkens back to when they first started being used. That was one of the references, was basically because of male bees. So these are also known as unmanned aerial vehicles. A drone is part of a bigger thing called an unmanned aerial system, and that system is composed of three different parts. You have the vehicle itself, which flies, as well as a controller, basically a pilot, and then you have some sort of system which allows the two to communicate, so that whether that's radio, satellite, however it's set up, it's basically a way for the vehicle to talk to the pilot so that that person can control the vehicle as it does whatever job it's supposed to do. Just as a reminder, topic 8 was basically examining whether robots would take your job. I wanted to make sure that generally drones are not considered robots because they have pilots. Robots are things which act on their own. They're programmed, and they, think of a Roomba vacuum if you want to. That's a robot, and you set that thing loose, and it's going to vacuum the floor in your home or your apartment. With a drone, unless you have the drone take off and then start controlling it, it's not going to do something. So because a drone has a pilot, it's not considered a robot. However, as we've been talking about artificial intelligence and with several different applications throughout this the semester, people are trying to incorporate more and more artificial intelligence in these vehicles so that they would become potentially autonomous, at which point there would be there would be a robot as opposed to just a man, a controlled drone. So that's why we're talking about them here. The different types that I wanted to show you, and this is pretty much where I'm going to spend most of the time. I just wanted to show you several different implementations of this technology. How are they used in the military, commercially, for law enforcement, and then other first responders? Because the way that these have been creatively deployed is really, really cool. And so that's where I wanted to spend time as we got into this. So the first drone I have, the first collection, I have about 4 different military drones I wanted to show you very, very briefly. The first is basically an aerial target. And this is a plane that is controlled by people on the ground. It's a full-size airplane. And when people are learning to dogfight, they can, at least at one point in time, they would fight these QF-4 aerial targets. They would try and shoot these down. Or if you had like a SAM site, you had like a missile battery that you're trying to learn how to use. These planes can fly over and you can shoot these things down. Of course, they're really expensive, so it's not like any kind of airplane is super expensive. Even ones that you're going to blow up. But this is one of the military implementations of a drone that I wanted to show you. So it's actually something that's going to be destroyed, but it gives target practice to missile units, SAM units, stingers, that sort of stuff, and even other planes as they're learning how to fight other planes in the air. Now, the next 2 are surveillance drones. And by the way, if you look in the notes of the presentation, there are links out to slideshows which show you and give you lots of information about each of these different types of. And so, like down here in the links down there, I'm not going to open them up right now. But if you wanted to learn more about any of these military drones, check out this military.com and these different details down here. So the next 2 are surveillance drones. And when we talk about surveillance, what that means you're watching somebody. You're trying to see. And so as you look at this one, in that picture it doesn't look that big, but that's at least as big as a man. As a man, that's like at least 6 feet across on the wingspan right there. And it's got a launcher which shoots it up in the air and it takes off. And then there are pilots which basically then control it. And it's used to go out and see. So you're trying to see part of the battlefield better. And so this is the type of device that Kai was talking about that was just Dr. Meggers was talking about that was just doing so much damage to their troops. Is these things, once they found a target, within 2 minutes they were calling in artillery on them based on the camera systems that were on these types of drones. So even if it's not a very big one, even something that's 6 feet across, it can have a devastating effect if it can see and if it can communicate back to somebody else that can call in other weapon systems to do damage. So that's one. And then there's a naval application of it. This is cool. It looks like a helicopter, but it's a drone. It flies off of ships, and it goes and see other ships, and perhaps you're going to send missiles. Let's say you have TOWs or something on here. No, what are they called? Like Tomahawks or something. You're going to shoot off these kind of ships, or maybe you have submarines in the area, or just to coordinate attacks. But these are surveillance devices as well. And again, if you want to look in the notes and see the size of these things, they're almost as big as full-size helicopters. Pretty cool devices that go out there and allow people to see more of the enemy, see more of the battlefield. The last one I'll show you is a military application, is the Reaper. And this is a really big plane. It's like a full-size plane. You can see like it's armed here with missiles on the side. If you watched the Jack Ryan show with John Krasinski, in that first series of Jack Ryan, this is the type of drone that those drone pilots out of I guess it was Missouri or maybe out of Nevada, you can fly them from super far away, and so they're being launched, I believe, out of probably Turkey, and they're flying in the Middle East over like Afghanistan, Iraq, those areas being piloted from the Midwest United States, and they're seeing the enemy. They're again, it can be armed, so that, and it flies very, very high, tens of thousands of feet up, and so no one knows it's there, and then it's able to inflict quite a lot of damage. And so those are different kinds of drones, airplanes that are used militarily. The rest of things I was going to show you are a lot smaller than this. They're things that we would use commercially, and for law enforcement and for firefighters and people like that. So let me change gears and jump over to those types of devices. All right, this next category is commercial drones, and the first commercial implementation of drone usage that I can find is sort of entertaining. It's from Minnesota. It's back all the way in 2014. You can see there is one of those multi-copter drones that's flying in Minnesota. This is from a CNN report on January 31st, 2014. And basically, there was a liquor store in Minnesota that was delivering beer to ice fishermen. And I guess they'd use a cell phone and call and say, "Hey, I'm at point X, on the lake, and can you send us a 12-pack of Heineken or something like that?" And they would, they'd fly it over. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, shut this down. This wasn't allowed to go on very, very long. But this is one of the first implementation of package delivery, and this is all the way back in 2014. Again, if you want to see details, look in the notes, and I have links out to the story that tell you about that. Amazon, of course, I'm sure you're aware that Amazon is experimenting with having drone delivery. That last mile, trying to get packages from the distribution centers out to the customers in that last mile. That's the most expensive part of the process, is what they say. And so having autonomous vehicles which can cruise the neighborhood and drop those things off, whether that's a car or whether that's a drone, those are things that companies are, FedEx and Amazon, are experimenting with. Let me show you a longer list here. This is a list of commercial uses that I got from my friend Brian Cherry, and he is also a military pilot. He's also he's a Marine Corps pilot. Now he's retired from that. He now flies jets for UPS, but on the side he has this drone business, and there are so many really cool applications how he's using drones and the cameras that they can carry for not only photography but for data collection, that I want to share with you just some of these. His website is www.higherperspective.media, and you can get that from the notes of the presentation here. I encourage you to check out his website. And just to give you, I'm going to jump over to his page just so you can see what it looks like. Hold on one second. Okay, so I'm in browser. These are different bits of footage that Brian has captured with his drones while doing jobs, and you can see he's been in business a long time, and he has just a tremendous number of different projects that have been that he has worked on. Everything from what you would think of with real estate, where someone has a new property that they want to sell, so you get a bunch of good pictures of it, to some others. So if you come to his page, and he's out of Louisville, by the way, he's out of Louisville, Kentucky. They were on vacation, I think, up towards the Northeast when with that lighthouse, and so he's just all kinds of really cool applications here. So let's talk about a couple. Okay, so I'm back in the PowerPoint. Just mention a couple of things that he told us about. The first is data collection that I think is really neat, and you saw a snapshot of some of the footage that he of that process a second ago when I was showing you the site. There is a charcoal company up in Louisville. I think it's Kingsford, Kingsford Charcoal. And if you're from Louisville, then you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But they have they bring in wood and all these wood chips, and they process the wood chips and make charcoal that you would then use in your barbecue grill to make, to cook a steak or chicken or something like that. And this big lot where they keep all their wood is their inventory. And so what Brian does on a very regular basis, he goes and he has his drones, and he has cameras on them, or I don't know how many he uses at once, but let's say it's just one. He puts a camera on it, and when it's on the ground, it knows where the ground is. That's sea level, let's say. And then what it does is it flies over the piles of all the wood that's in this big lot. And it doesn't just fly over it and look at it. It flies over it in a pattern, like if you were mowing the grass. And if you've ever mowed grass, you don't just go from point to point. There's like you have a set path that you go to make sure that you mow the grass well, right? Well, the drone does the same thing, and the camera is looking down the whole time. And as it's doing that, it's recording what the height of the piles of wood are. And so when it's done, it plots all that, and he does it regularly enough that they know when this pile is getting shorter and this pile is getting taller. And because with the types of cameras that he uses, he can also tell what the temperature is of the different piles. And because of you don't want it to get too hot, because as it sits there and starts to age, it basically gets hotter, and then you want to use it when it's at its best point. You want to set it when it's like it's most mature for it to make charcoal out of. If you let it go too long, then it doesn't make good charcoal. And so that's just, again, one of his customers, and that whole data collection thing. I thought, man, I never would have thought of that. Another thing that he's done with his stuff is with regard to cell towers. And think about how many cell towers there are all over the place. Those have to be inspected on a very regular basis, because if one of those things fell over, it would hurt a lot of people or property. And so instead of sending people to climb all the way to the top and look at everything as they go, what they're starting to do is they're building those, or basically setting those up in such a way that a lot of the times the barcodes and stuff that you need to identify parts are facing out. And cameras, drones will fly around those towers from bottom to top, basically filming the entire thing. And there's somebody looking at each of the parts and visually inspecting it from the ground. And if they see something that looks fishy, they can note what the barcode is on that particular one, and then go check that one particular thing out. But if the whole thing looks pretty good, in an hour or two, you've just checked out that tower. Whereas if you had to have somebody climb up there because it's such a safety risk, that would have been like a whole day. So one person can go out and inspect 3 or 4 towers in a day, where otherwise they would have just gotten one done. So that was kind of a neat one. Last one, again with the cameras that can sense heat. He did a project with the Fish and Wildlife people that he told us about that was really neat, where they basically were trying to count elk. There's an elk population over in the eastern part of the state, and they try to go out and count those, the mamas and the dads and the babies, at least once a year. And I think it's in the fall. It's when after the leaves fall off of the trees, at least. And so I don't know if it's winter or fall, but what they did with his cameras is they went out there and they basically, because the reason, and what this is replacing is, in the past they've sent up helicopters, and people basically have just, National Guard guys have sat by the doors of the helicopters and looked for elk, and you have to do it at night. And so imagine trying to find an elk in the woods at night, and helicopters are kind of noisy, so they scare the elk and they run away anyhow. So they're not probably getting as many elk counted as they would like to. So with the drones, they're much quieter, and with these heat sensing cameras, what they were able to do is go up and basically see the animals. Now the only problem, he said that they ran into 2 problems. One, it's hard to tell a male from a female just from body heat, because antlers that are on the male elk, those don't show up, because I guess it's, that's dead tissue and that doesn't show up. So what they did, they looked for big elks with baby elks with them. They counted those as mamas, and then they counted the ones going around by themselves as males. So it worked. The other trouble they ran into is there actually somebody shot at his drone there on that particular job. Somebody was shooting at his drone, so they brought the drone back and put it away, and they came back again later when they had their own people that had guns in case they had to get in had to protect themselves or something. But very interesting work. And so those sort of implementations of using drones commercially, I think, are just really cool. So those are a few things for you. Let's next get to law enforcement. And there, of course, are federal and state and local departments. And at this point, anybody can go out to Sam's Club or Costco and buy a drone at this point. So anybody is potentially going to be using a drone for their law enforcement purposes. These devices, or drones, can be used for surveillance, just like we talked about already with the military. Let's say you suspect there's a drug deal that's taking place, or a place where drugs are being sold. If you had a drone, you could surveil that location and see who's going and coming. If you tied that into facial recognition, you may be able to identify people from a distance. If you were going to raid it, you could see, when people were, had dropped their guard. Let's say they're not standing by the doors or something like that, and you could then, have the best chance of making getting in there and not being hurt, or having a fight over it. So surveillance is definitely something that law enforcement uses drones for. And if you do read the no side of issue 16, that's one of the things that the Border Patrol has a number of drones, and the number of other federal agencies which constantly are asking to use those is pretty high, and I guess the reimbursement rates, and that's why it's an audit, just like if you were financially audited. And so the reimbursement rate is such that the Border Patrol is basically kind of being the ones paying the bill for all these other federal agencies, putting all these hours and surveillance on these drones that they have. And that's like one of the recommendations, like you need better accounting. If you're going to loan out your drones to people, you need to get them to where they pay you more, so you're not losing money. So surveillance is a big one. Some other ones that are interesting. There have been some legislation that has gone through in North Dakota, at least, where you can now arm a drone with non-lethal weapons. So something like a beanbag round that you could fire off of a drone, or pepper spray kind of stuff off of a drone, or even tasers off of a drone. And so that's from 2015. North Dakota passed a law giving its law enforcement officials permission to use unarmed aerial vehicles armed with non-lethal use of force weapons. Again, if you want to look in the notes and see more about that. But that's pretty interesting. If you're, let's say you have some guy that's at some sort of standoff and the guy's just not giving up, and you don't want to send somebody in there because he could, shoot and hurt somebody. You still want to you still want to apprehend this guy, but you'd rather not hurt that person. Well, maybe you hit him with pepper spray, or you hit him with a taser and from a drone, and then at that point people can rush in there and then arrest the person. So kind of neat ideas about using drones in a law enforcement fashion. From fire departments, I've got a buddy who is a fireman up in North Oldham County in Louisville, and they have a guy on their fire squad that has a drone that has a camera with like the temperature sensing stuff. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll if they get to a building and if they have the time, if they can do it, they'll check out the building and see where the hot spots are, because I guess if you're going to put people on a roof, you want to make sure they're not going to fall through the roof because it's just about to burn through, as one example. Or if you're just trying to see, is it safe for us to put the ladder truck up there and get onto the roof and start fighting from the top down? You can very quickly fly a drone up there, look down and see whether the roof is still intact or not. So, and they also use that for insurance. If they're going to be, let's say a huge hailstorm rolls through Bowling Green, your insurance company adjusters will show up with their drones, fly over your house and do a visual inspection of the roof of your house to see whether you need a new roof, and then cut checks accordingly. So uses of cameras in fire departments to assess how hot fires are, or whether situations are safe to deploy people. Those are ways that they're used. In natural disasters, this one was the Houston floods back in 2017, as you can see from the timestamp down there in the lower left corner. They were used to basically try and find people, who is stuck and who can we go and help. And not only are they used to find people, they're also used to and these are all examples of where they're helping find people and assess damage. But in addition to that, they're also being used to output basically wireless access. Because think about, like, when there's a catastrophe like that, the cell towers don't work. And so with a drone, you fly a drone over that has this ability to basically provide Wi-Fi or cell service in that area. Then all of a sudden someone, hey, my phone still has battery charge, let me call and tell them where I am so I can get help. So AT&T and Verizon, for example, have help with that. And they call them flying cows. They're called cell on wings. And if you look in the notes, you'll see some more information about AT&T and Verizon and how they're helping with this sort of thing. Okay, so thank you for your attention on that. Most of the controversy that comes from drones is basically just privacy concerns. People are concerned whether, if there's a camera on a thing that's flying around my house, and safety concerns. You don't want something to fly into your house and break your house or you. You don't want, and you also don't want people watching you or taking pictures of you that, nobody wants that. And so those are major concerns. And if you want to read through the notes, that's not anything we're talking about here, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip it right now. But if you want to read more about what some of the laws are with regard to photography and drones, please take a look at these slides down in the notes. You can study about drones. I've got some links out to associates, bachelor's, and master's and PhD programs related to drone usage. And those come from like Sinclair Community College has the associate program, Embry, Riddle Aeronautical University in Indiana has the bachelor's, and Oklahoma State University has a master's and PhD programs which can relate to drones. And so those are pretty interesting. And then lastly, I have my sources, and there's several. So hopefully you learned something new about drones. Again, if we put enough AI in these things and get them to be autonomous, they will be robots, at which point they'll be flying for themselves, which ties them right into what we're talking about. Will a robot take your job? And that's one of the things I want you thinking about for the issue analysis is if whose job would be threatened potentially by a drone. And that could be just like a traditional drone or even like an AI drone. And there are several. And I'm going to let you ponder that as you work on your issue analysis. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a good night.